I'm very happy today to have Thayne Alexander on Razmafsar TV. And hi, Thayne, how are you today?
I'm good, Menasher. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to have you here because we met when I was teaching in the United States. We met, I think it was at Chicago Swordplay Guild event, right? And
Yeah, it was. I'm sorry, it was a WMAW. It was the Western Martial Art Workshop. I think it was
that's
like
right.
4 years ago.
Yes, that's right. And I saw that you were practicing with a Bowie knife and with a knife. And as you might know, possibly, I'm very interested in the whole history of United States, specifically early America. Not only Native Americans, but also settlers. What kind of weapons they used? I mean, both sides, right? Native American settlers, and part of it is the Bowie knife. So I mean, I really love that, and I really liked it that you were, teaching and practicing this art. So that's why I would like again to say to all viewers on this channel, and we have a number of videos on early American knives and things on our channel. So it's really good to have you. And could you please first, before we go ahead, let us tell our viewers about yourself, who you are, about what type of martial arts you have been practicing, or better, what type of martial arts did you start with?
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be on this YouTube channel and to be talking to you today. So thank you so much for that. Yeah, my background started in the very early teens. My very first martial art was Aikido. I was very interested in the Japanese arts, and I know you are as well. You love the Japanese culture as well. I started in Aikido. I was in Rapid City, South Dakota at the time. It's in the middle of the United States. Basically I started there, just a traditional, Aikido, wearing the gi, and all that. And basically just going over a lot of rolls and falls and really immersing myself in that martial art. I started there, and I took that for about a year and a half. I really got the rolls down and such because it's interesting, like a lot of Aikido, some people vary if the techniques work or not. But one thing that absolutely works in Aikido is the rolls and falls. Because, a lot of times people may never be in an encounter in their life, but they will fall, and a lot of times they break themselves. And those falls and rolls have saved me more than anything else. So
I agree with you.
Yeah, from there, I did move on to Shorin-Ryu Kenpo. I was still in Rapid at the time. Basically, I was working with some military gentlemen who were stationed at one of the Air Force bases there, and he was stationed in Okinawa at the time, where he learned that. And I took Shorin-Ryu Kenpo for a number of years, and I received a high belt in that, so I was almost a black belt, so I was like almost the high brown belt. And I love the hand motions, and it was really fast hand motions, and I built my speed from that. So we used to throw a lot of combinational, hits. So I enjoyed that art a lot until I actually had to move from there, so I couldn't finish. But from there, I moved on to Muay Thai. I've taken a lot of Muay Thai and some boxing, and I took some Jujutsu as well. Some of the hard styles from Japan. I didn't really get a lot of belt systems in that, but I did, learn some of the good basics from that. From there, I just kind of fell into HEMA at that time as well. A couple of years later, I've been doing historical European martial arts now for like 22 years. I started about 99. And been doing it ever since. I still do it. I do the system of Fiore di Libre. It's the ancient Italian art, and Filippo Botti. I've been studying those for a long time. I am now working a little bit with the German systems of Meyer and Joachim Meyer and such. So branching out a little bit, but a Fiore is such a complete system. I can do that for the rest of my life.
Yes.
And I do love swords. I've been a sword fan all of my life. I've actually taken some kendo before. not enough to really say, you know, I learned the techniques and such, but I just didn't pursue it as much as, you know, the European arts at the time. A lot of this was because I was moving and I was going through, you know, go to the West Coast and stuff like that. So I just never been able to continue to pursue. But some Japanese arts. From there, I moved on to the Southeast Asian arts. I have been a student of Michael Janish's martial blade concept system for like 18 years. I started with him personally and spent about 14 years with him. I did become a full instructor in his system. Basically, martial blade concepts is a streamlined version of Kali Eskrima, basically kind of removing a lot of the unnecessary motions and basically kind of just being able to use it in a more practical sense to basically take out your opponent as fast as possible. So I've really been doing that. I've been teaching that for a long time. From there, kind of going backwards again, I started doing Bowie Knife training and tomahawk training about the same time as I did MBC. So I've been doing that for almost 20 years. So I'm just studying Bowie Knife and the American weapons like we're going to talk about today. I've always found the American melee weapons very interesting. And the Bowie Knife is very unique in a lot of aspects. And I really enjoyed that part of it as well. We'll talk more about that in a second. But my last part is I'm now still a student of the Box Lacan Savate. So I've been studying French Savate and the Dans de Rue version of Savate. So I'm really enjoying that. And that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Perfect. Very nice. Very extensive martial arts experience. Good to hear that. Let's start because, I mean, I could comment. We are going to invite you more so we can discuss about other martial arts. Specifically, I'm interested in the system of Kali as well in the, you know, Southeast Asian, but we will do it separately. Today, we are going to concentrate on Bowie, right? Thayne, right? Sure. Perfect. So first of all, please tell our viewers, who was Bowie? And let's start like that. Who was Bowie? Yes.
Yes. James Bowie. Basically, James Bowie was. I do have some notes because it's quite extensive, you know. So I'll just kind of refer to some of that. Basically, James Bowie was born in Kentucky in 1796. He was the ninth child out of 10, basically at the time. So he had many brothers. Basically, he was. His dad was a landowner back in that time period, and James picked that up with his brother Reason. Basically, they both went into business together. But James Bowie he joined the military at a young age. When he was done with that, he basically traveled around as a landowner or land seller, and basically also was a slave owner as well. His dad did own about 7 slaves, African American slaves at the time. You know, it was just the time period, you know, during the American slave. So, but James was a slaver at that time. When he traveled around the South of the United States quite extensively. He spent most of his time in Louisiana, where basically his brother made the first Bowie knife, or actually Bowie knife. And basically he was just an adventurer. He was a explorer. He was a hunter. He was a trapper. So he did many, many different things. He was a very tall man. He was very stout, kind of buff. He was very slow to anger, but when he did, he was very dangerous. He was basically a warrior, and he always used knives. And his dad taught him how to use pistol and rifle, and then work with a knife when he was a child. Basically, when he spent his time in Louisiana, which he spent most of his life in Louisiana. Now, Louisiana, if most people don't know, it's the state in the south part of the United States, kind of the south middle part of the United States on the bay, the Mexican, the Gulf of Mexico. So at that time, basically, he was just trying to make a living. Basically, he did some unscrupulous things. He was trying to do some he was kind of not really a swindler, but he was trying to buy a lot of land and buy a lot of property at the time. And He got himself in trouble with a lot of different people. Him and his brother were together quite often. And basically, you know, buying land at that time and basically trying to vie for certain property and stuff made a lot of enemies back in those days. So, you know, he was kind of known to be, you know, oh, it's James Bowie, you know, it's being kind of unscrupulous. But that's who he was at that time. So.
And now let's go to his knife, and we are going to talk about his duels and things like that. The knife design, did I understand you correctly? The blade or the first types were made in the United States. It was not imported from Sheffield, England. Correct?
No, the Sheffield knife came a little after he made himself famous with the fight at the sandbar duel. Basically, the knife itself was, I actually have a picture, but I want to talk about the actual sandbar duel that made him famous. When he was in Louisiana, he basically crossed paths with a man named Colonel Norris Wright. And basically, he didn't like Bowie from the get-go. Basically, they had some run-ins together. They actually had a fist fight beforehand. Basically, this was a time where New Orleans, from New Orleans was the city where it's kind of a hub. So basically, every time when in Europe and the Spanish and stuff, they would all come to New Orleans because of the port there. So you had all sorts of cultures that are clashing, you know, like and trying to mismatch together. Yeah. So you had a lot of people come from Europe with different styles. And if we're going to talk about like the Bowie style, but we'll get into that. But the thing was, Norris Wright basically had a problem with Bowie. And basically with the sandbar duel, the sandbar duel was on the river, on the Mississippi River. Now, Bowie, the thing was with that started off this massive fight that basically became famous even in Europe was James Bowie wasn't there to do the duel. It was actually two other gentlemen that Bowie was with. And basically, you know, there were so many various reasons why people fought duels in New Orleans. It was over a woman or property or just a slight or someone bumped into you. There was a lot of duels on the sandbar. And this was under the dueling trees, so the dueling oaks. And there's two oak trees that are standing on that are still there, and they're really large and beautiful.
Oh, they're still there.
They're still there.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So they have these big giant oak trees. There's just trees there, and people would fight under them. You know, they had various fights. So you had people fighting with knives. You had people fighting with flintlock guns. You know, back then they had the flintlock, so they would only shoot once. So they would pull and then fire. You know, and they would try to shoot each other. You know, and then they would line up. There were sword duels. They actually had saber duels and rapier duels, and they had all sorts of different type of duels. And this would happen almost daily for a long time, for decades, in New Orleans. But going back real quick, Bowie was with a friend of his, and that friend was going to be in a duel. And then this other person that he was going to duel with had Major Norris Wright with him and a couple other gentlemen. So they all meet up at the sandbar, right? The sandbar is like a beach. So basically they're there, and what happened was those two gentlemen fought. They both missed, but what happened was this bled the people that they were with, Bowie and then the other people. They basically started talking shit, talking things, and basically they actually had a big brawl. There was a big fight that ensued. What happened was Norris finally just had enough, and he found an opportunity to try to end Bowie right there. So basically what happened was Norris pulled a sword cane. They all had canes at the time, but they had swords with them, right? Sword cane. He pulls out a skinny sword cane and he starts coming after Bowie with it. And basically what happened was, before he did that, Norris got so mad he pulled his flintlock pistol and he shot at Bowie, and he shot him in the chest. Bowie got hit like in the upper chest area. So he's shot for one. Next thing you know, Bowie kind of stumbles a bit. Norris then pulls his sword cane and then basically stabs him in the breast. And then he hit his breastplate, like, he had a plate like right here. And what happened was the thing hit and it kind of skidded off. So he did get stabbed, but it didn't kill him.
Just to understand you understand it correct. He was wearing a breastplate.
No, he was, how like some people have just a
breastplate. Excuse me, I just misunderstood.
Yeah, my bad. So he's wearing just a shirt, like a shirt coat. Yes. But they just called it the breast, the chest.
Yes, that's right.
So he got stabbed in the chest.
I just
So
want to
he-
make sure if I understand you correctly.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, no, my bad.
Because I was
But-
just saying he was shot there, then he was stabbed there. What kind of human being was he? That's the
Right.
reason I wondered, right? Okay.
So at this point, he's shot. He's shot in the upper chest. By this time, Norris Wright then pulls his sword cane and stabs him. And it kind of hits his bone here, and it kind of skids off, but he's got stabbed. So he's stabbed. And then what happened again, then his other friend came at him and stabbed him again. So he got stabbed in the leg. So he got stabbed in the thigh as well. So at this point, Jim Bowie's bleeding. He's basically shot and he's stabbed twice. What he did was Norris was standing over him, ready to finish him. Jim Bowie gets mad. He grabs him by his arm and he pulls out his big giant Bowie at the time and basically just shoves it in and guts him and just stabs him right in the heart and basically ends it right there. Just kills Norris right there. Then what happened was his friend was sitting there and he reaches over and he slices this guy's other arm. And he starts fighting still, and the other guy gets cut and drops his weapon, and they basically take off. So basically here he basically pulled a giant knife. What people said or witnessed at the time was Jim Bowie pulls this big giant blade out, right? It's this big wide blade compared to the sword cane, and he kind of parries it and he stabs him. And he or the other person. So he's stabbed, and then he had to have help coming back. And basically, at that point, he actually thought he was going to die. He's like, okay, well, I'm dead. But basically, he mended. He basically survived it. He basically mended. They healed him, and he survived. But when that happened, the witnesses said it was just an all-out brawl, right? 2 people died that day. The rest were like wounded really badly. Everybody went their ways, and basically the news heard about it. And the newspaper started to report on this. And after that, he even went to Europe. Like England heard about this duel. And basically then he heard about the big knife that Jim Bowie used. And so Jim basically, okay, cool. He basically went on with his life. And then the story spread across the United States at the time. And then everybody was like, well, what was the knife he used? What was that knife? He's like, he just had this big, beautiful knife. He just, killed the guy right away. So that took off. So then after that duel is where Jim Bowie's name took off and he became a hero, a folk hero at that, sort of at that time. And then basically his knife just took off. Everyone was like, well, what kind of knife was that? I want a knife like that. So you had places in New York and basically wanting to build big knives in that way. And then you heard some knife companies out of Cincinnati were basically wanting to build Bowie knives. And that's where England heard about it. And that's where England said, okay, you know what? Hey, this big knife, there was a big market for these big knives. So that's where they came up with the Sheffield knife or afterward.
Okay.
So they started making those knives and then trying to sell them to Americans because Americans love their knives. They're like, oh, hey, look at this. They got these big knives. So they started selling those. And then the knife basically took off for a long time from about after the sandbar duel in 1827, around 1830 is where people started hearing the Bowie knife. That's where, like in part of my notes, basically the first recorded term of the Bowie knife being called a Bowie knife was in 1834. And it was done by an Englishman named George Featherstone Hogg, I believe his name is. So an Englishman actually coined the term Bowie knife. So because of Jim Bowie. And that's how the name took off. But at the time, Bowie knives were just big knives, right? The knife that took off, or the one James used, they say looked like just a normal butcher knife. It's just like a long, about 12, 13, 14-inch Bowie, like a butcher knife. And they say that this is the picture. If I want to show you here and get this correctly, it looks just like so.
Oh, this looks like one of those early trade knives. Yeah.
Yeah. So that right there, this is about 17 inches, 12-inch blade, 5-inch handle, and it looks nothing spectacular, right? It's very simple. It's a very simple blade. It's just wide, and it basically looks like a butcher knife. It looks like a knife somebody would use to cut meat, or like a hunting knife.
Yeah.
So that right there, now this knife is actually called the Edwin Forrest knife. Now, this knife is actually real, and they say that this gentleman named Edwin Forrest, who was a stage actor back then, knew Bowie and was good friends with James Bowie. And he says that James Bowie gave him this knife. And he said this is the knife that he claims this was the knife that he gave him or that he used in the sandbar duel. Now, there's a lot of speculation. I want to make sure to everybody watching now, watching this very much so that there's no recorded real picture or anything of what James used at the sandbar duel. There's no real, James basically had many knives through his life, and his brother Reason basically was the knife maker in the family. So every time when James needed a new knife, he'd go to his brother, and his brother would just make him a new knife. And his brother just made simple knives, made like, hunting knives. Here you go, James. So that Jim had probably half a dozen knives through his career, and it wasn't a big deal to him. And he just liked the big knife. Well, Resin just made a big knife for him, and that knife was probably the most likely the one that looked like he used in his famous duel. And it wasn't anything special. It doesn't have a clip point. It's not like this one here. This one I want to show has like a clip point. It doesn't look anything like this.
Yeah.
It's just a flat, butcher knife. So there's a lot of speculation and a lot of debate amongst scholars, but basically we don't know. That's the thing. It's like, if anybody asks, well, what did Jim use? We're like, it's lost in history. There's just no picture.
Where is that knife kept? You showed us the picture. Where is that knife?
That knife was basically when Edwin had the knife, Edwin basically made a lot of money. He became super wealthy. And what happened was he took that knife and he put it in a case with a bunch of other like theatrical weapons because he was an actor, right? So he took that and he put that in a case in his house. When he got older, he decided to sell pretty much everything he had, and he donated that building, and he donated the knife and donated everything to an acting for actors. Like he made he turned his home into like an acting a home for actors, right? So basically that lasted until about the 1900s. And then after the 1900s, they moved it into a whole nother building somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where. They have the picture of it. But in that building, that stayed until about 1970. And after 1970, they couldn't have any more money to keep it going anymore. So unfortunately, they had to sell most of everything. So what happened was a man named Bill Williamson, who I believe passed away recently. He was a Bowie knife collector, and he was a historian. He found out about this knife, and he was shocked by it, and he actually found a way to buy it. So that knife, I believe, after Bill died, I think it was auctioned off. So, and I don't know who has it or what hands it's in right now.
So it's in a private collection. Okay.
It's in a private collection somewhere. So, but that is an actual picture of the knife itself. After when Bill Williamson actually took the knife, he kind of kept it on the down low for a while, and then he decided to make an announcement that he had the knife. So that's how we got pictures of it. Now, again, that could be the knife, but that could just be another variation that Resin made for him, like his brother. That's the kind of knives that Resin basically made for James a lot. So it's not like the funky ones with the beautiful, clip point and the nice, those all came later, like started people like, again, when the knife took off in the late, 1800s, 1840s, 1850s, people started to kind of add more stuff to them, but they became popular. So. Okay,
the current design you showed us, with the clip point, and then it has also hand guard. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not a cross guard, but it's a small guard, right? Yeah, exactly. So this one. Yeah.
Let's talk about that. So, okay, this one here, this is a trainer, right? It's not sharp. It's just one of my favorite trainers. I love it. Basically, it's aluminum, but basically, a lot of Bowie knives. Let's talk about that. A lot of Bowie knives just have a simple cross. Okay, real easy, right? If I had the duel with this, it's probably going to catch just a little bit. Like here, I have another knife here I'll discuss here. So we would just kind of come down and kind of catch here. I don't really rely on that all that much for like a fighting Bowie. This is more of like a utilitarian Bowie, I would say, like for everyday tasks. But yes, you can do some guard catching with it, like especially here. Some people would use this as the ring. I don't do that, but it was known that they could do that. So like, you know, if you wanted to fight, you might be able to catch it in here. See what I mean? Basically, yeah, you do have a little bit of a guard, okay? But and there is Bowie knives. You see lots of them that have this simple cross, okay? So a lot of times the Bowie knife is two different things, right? It's basically a utilitarian knife, okay? So basically you can use it for your everyday tools. You can use it for hunting. You can use it for camping. You know, you can till the soil with it, that kind of thing. And then there's the fighting version of it, okay? So I'll get into the fighting version in a second. But the thing with the Bowie knife is it's first and foremost, it's a frontier tool, okay? Yeah. So people used this back in the 1800s. Life was still hard. You know, like, you know, people were still traveling and most of America still wasn't state. There was still open land. There's a lot of Native Americans. There's a lot of fighting and stuff. But the thing about the Bowie knife is you're supposed to do a couple things with the Bowie knife. They say that the Bowie knife, there was an old saying that says your Bowie knife should do multiple things. You should be able to chop wood with it, right? It's thick enough where you should be able to make it in chop wood with a good Bowie knife. You'll be able to shave with it. Should be sharp enough to shave with it. You should be able to use wide enough to paddle with it. So there's sometimes if you're in a canoe or boat and you don't have anything, your Bowie knife would be wide enough to basically paddle with it to get, you know, back to land. You're basically able to kind of till the soil with it. And then also at the same time, you're supposed to learn how to defend with it. It's supposed to be your weapon for defense. So the Bowie knife is a utilitarian tool. It's just a great weapon tool to have. So with that said, you know, with the functions of it, basically, you know, you should be able to do multiple different things. But again, it also kind of depends on the type of Bowie knife, right? Because there's multiple different types as well. And I'll show you some examples of different ones.
So where did this design come from? It was after Bowie became famous, people started to fancy and adding elements to it, like a cross guard, clip point. Okay, we know that already. It happens in many cultures. You're right.
Yep, absolutely. Well, the first one, basically what happened was when the knife took off throughout the country, basically people started to kind of, you know, again, like you said, change things. Now, just to keep in mind, the Bowie knife reason basically took the design of most of the Bowie knives from the Europeans, basically the Spanish mostly. Now, the Spanish were the first to arrive in the United States, right? They were some of the first people to arrive in New Orleans and the South area. So there was that influence with the knife. A lot of Bowie knife is from derivative from Spanish Navaja. So if you ever seen a Spanish dirk, you know, like the dirk is kind of like, I'll use this as an example. The Spanish dirk has like a straight back, and then it has kind of almost like a slant type point, and then basically it kind of just comes down. So it's almost triangular, but it almost has like an early Bowie feel. So basically, and then it would have just a normal cross. Resin took that idea from the Spanish, from a lot of Spanish influence. So that's why you see some of the clip points have like that slope. Like, here's a good example. This is a keen edge Bowie trainer. You see how here this has like a sloping one instead of so much more of a curve?
Yeah.
You can tell that a little different. So like the Spanish would have a sloping one and then mostly kind of almost a straight blade here. So that's kind of where the original design came from a bit. Now the clip point, of course, has been around in Europe for a long time, for centuries, like with the mezzer. Like you've ever seen like a Dusac and a mezzer that have the clip point. So that was part of the design as well, or part of the influence for the Bowie knife. Now again, the Bowie knife is derivative from like a lot of the techniques come from Spanish Navaja. They come from English backsword, small sword, mezzer, but most of it comes from saber. So, you know, but the design itself comes from more of a Spanish influence along with some of the clip point adding. So it's kind of a mismatch. You gotta understand, like, you know, there's no manuals with Bowie knife. It's mostly basically people, like, again, going back to New Orleans with that culture, people from Spain would come and they would, influence, Spanish, style. They would, saber people from Germany, people from France, they would just throw their own designs and stuff together. And that's kind of how the Bowie knife kind of evolved a little bit.